stupidity on China, the big AI conference, or it wasn't a conference, it's a safety dialogue they held in Beijing.
Yeah.
That is who I want to determine the safety of AI is definitely the Chinese Communist Party,
Yes.
just like they determined the safety of the internet. What could go wrong?
Well, it wasn't just Chinese scientists. It was they had a lot of Western scientists as well, AI scientists.
Keeps coming back to the scientists.
Right. Well, and so these wizards, they met it like I think there are a lot of AI scientists around the world who are interested in AI and maybe even believe a lot in the positive applications of AI, but fear the dangerous applications of AI.
But also realize to build AI, you kind of need vast swaths of data that China can deliver because they don't have any privacy protection.
What could go wrong with doing your AI research in China, honestly?
This actually reminds me of how, remember when Google, and this is probably 2006 or thereabouts, Google pulled out of China for and they had this excuse it's human rights and all this and censorship, and they pulled out, and then they took a stand. But then, less than a decade later, we learned that they had been slowly reinvesting in China in AI research because China had all this enormous data on its own citizens that Google could tap into, by joint venturing. And train their AIs based on this mass surveillance program.
Oh, and look at how successful Google AI was.
Oh my God!
I mean, but I don't know if that explains how stupid and awful their AI is.
I think I think that's an internal Google issue.
Right,
that's for American issues.
Right. I mean, and I don't think that technology itself is good or evil. I don't think you can fit it into that category. It's just it is what it is. It does what it does, and depending on the intention of how people use it and how they program it, will affect what kind of results you get. So, if you're training an AI, and here's kind of a more extreme example, how do you stop terrorism? But you do it in communist China, where they define terrorism as all ethnic Uyghurs, and there's no restrictions on what you're allowed to do to stop people. An AI solution might be just well, I guess we'll just nuke the entire Xinjiang region, and that will stop all the terrorists, right? So I'm not saying that that's actually what would happen.
This example has really gone far.
Well, it has gone far, but my point is that the CCP is already doing the things that without AI that AI is not supposed to be doing, right?
Well, I mean, I think you're saying that if the CCP trained AI, it would go towards more extreme, because the CCP solution to terrorism, quote unquote, is essentially to reprogram all Uyghurs.
Right. It's starts with mass surveillance, and then you can use AI to determine who has wrongthink, and then
then you get into pre-crime territory, right?
Which is the party's already doing. They have technology that supposedly predicts if you're gonna commit a crime based on your facial features or your emotional state. If you're oh,
yeah, I'm sure that works really
right.
well.
Yeah,
right.
Does.
Because everyone except terrorists is very happy under the CCP.
That's true.
So then they identify people who are involved in wrongthink, and then they can put them in re-education, right? And so that's a great, from the CCP's perspective, a great use of AI. And Western scientists who are working with China in any capacity are essentially part of this system that the CCP is developing to use AI. CCP is not going to tell them that's how we're going to use it, but I mean, that's ultimately what is the CCP going to say? Oh, we promise not to use AI for mass surveillance or thought control. We promise we're not going to use it to militarize
everything.
Well,
I mean, I think it's the same with. It's not just AI, right? You see this. This is what happened with the Wuhan Institute of Virology stuff, where a lot of scientists were what was that company they were working with? Eco
Health Alliance.
Eco Health Alliance, right? they wanted to do this cutting edge research that they were promising was going to help prevent future pandemics, right? And who was willing to do things like, oh, research all of these bat coronaviruses and play around with the spike
Humanized mice.
proteins and humanized mice and like manipulate the viruses to be more, like this is like cutting edge science. And so from the perspective of this like outside nonprofit, they're like, oh, this is cutting edge science, but like, what does the CCP want to do with it? Probably something much more nefarious than
I mean, there's already a lot of information
Yeah.
about China's bioweapons programs.
But so then you have this whole thing where Western scientists do become complicit in things that are just like, from their perspective, like we're just like adding to the scientific body of knowledge, but that is not what the CCP is doing.
Right.
And they're not
Evil
funding
wizards.
this because they're evil
Well, I mean,
wizards.
also like it's just the entire all the Western internet companies who went to China, they didn't give China access to the internet. They allowed the CCP to build the Great Firewall to create a internet prison for China.
But yeah, anything where it's like, okay, or the organ harvesting stuff, right? China on the cutting edge of organ transplant medicine.
Bleeding edge.
Yeah. So why? Because they have this.
They've had a lot of practice.
Yeah. Like, why are they suddenly building up all of these transplant hospitals and stuff when they don't have an organ donor database? It's because where are they getting the organs from? The International Transplant Society. Let's not look into that too closely.
Yep.
Right. I remember like we had Ethan Gutman on the podcast, and he was like, it used to be that they were harvesting organs from like millions of Falun Gong. Well, he didn't give the number, but basically all these Falun Gong practitioners, right? And because the ideal age is like 26 or something. And then like they harvested so many organs that they basically ran out of Falun Gong to harvest from. And then they've switched to Uyghurs. That was kind of the point he made. It's been a gradual switch, but now you have, because you've got, 10 million Uyghurs or whatever.
And
who
when you run out of Uyghurs, there will be other people.
Right. I mean, you've got
Taiwan,
Tibetans, Southern Mongolians, but those aren't that big of populations. So you have to do other types of people. But they will not run out of people to call dissidents to then persecute. Ultimately, I mean, they'll just go after anyone.
The problem is the U.S. is playing Stardew Valley, China's playing RimWorld.